New York City at the dawn of the 20th century, a bustling metropolis teeming with life, opportunity, and stark contrasts. Immigrants from across the globe poured into its teeming streets, seeking a better life in the land of promise. Many found work in the city's burgeoning garment industry, a cornerstone of New York's economic powerhouse. Thousands of factories, sweatshops, and tenement workshops sprang up, their sewing machines humming day and night. Life for garment workers was a world of long hours, meager wages, and unsafe conditions. Women and young girls, many newly arrived immigrants, made up the majority of the workforce. They toiled in cramped, poorly ventilated spaces, surrounded by flammable fabrics and the constant clatter of machinery, the air thick with dust and the stench of sweat. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, located on the 8th, 9th and 10th floors of the Ash Building in Greenwich Village, epitomized the harsh realities of the garment industry. Owned by Max Blank and Isaac Harris, known as the Shirtwaist Kings, the factory employed over 500 workers, mostly young immigrant women. These women, hailing from Italy, Russia and Eastern Europe, sought a foothold in their adopted country. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, despite its outward appearance of modernity, concealed a sinister reality within its walls. The factory, with its promise of regular work and steady income, lured workers into a system rife with exploitation and disregard for their well-being. While Blank and Harris amassed wealth from their successful business, their employees toiled in conditions that prioritized profit over human life. Cramped workspaces overflowing with flammable fabrics left little room for movement. Safety regulations were practically non-existent. Fire exits were few, poorly marked, and often locked from the outside, a common practice to prevent theft and unauthorized breaks. The workers, mostly young women in their teens and early 20s, endured these harrowing conditions, with few options for recourse. Speaking out against the injustices carried the risk of losing their jobs, a gamble few could afford. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, a symbol of industrial progress, stood as a stark reminder of the human cost of unchecked greed. Saturday, March 25th, 1911. A day that began like any other at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. As the last scraps of fabric were sewn and cut, a spark, likely from a discarded cigarette or a faulty electrical wire, ignited a pile of cloth scraps beneath a cutting table. The fire spread with terrifying speed. The dry, flammable fabrics that filled the factory floor became an inferno within seconds. Flames raced across work tables, engulfing everything in their path. The air filled with choking smoke, plunging the room into darkness. Panic seized the workers as the realization dawned. They were trapped. The fire raged on, fueled by the very materials that sustained the factory's trade. The flames roared up the stairwell, cutting off the main escape route for those on the 9th floor. Trapped, they pressed against the locked doors that barred their escape. The owners, concerned about theft and unauthorized breaks, had sealed their fate. On the 10th floor, some workers, realizing the futility of escape, huddled together, seeking solace in one another's arms as the flames closed in. The fire department arrived swiftly, but their ladders, reaching only 6 stories high, proved woefully inadequate against the inferno engulfing the upper floors. The fire, extinguished after a mere 18 minutes, left behind a scene of unimaginable devastation. The death toll was staggering. 146 souls perished in the inferno, the youngest victim just 14 years old. The city reeled in horror and grief as the full extent of the tragedy became known. Newspapers splashed gruesome images of the fire's aftermath across their front pages. The public outcry was immediate and deafening. Thousands marched in silent processions, their faces etched with sorrow and anger. Labor unions, outraged by the blatant disregard for workers' safety, organized massive protests. The tragedy at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory became a lightning rod for social change. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, a horrific testament to industrial negligence, ignited a movement for workplace safety and labor reform that reverberated throughout the nation. The public outcry, fueled by grief and anger, forced lawmakers to confront the inhumane conditions endured by countless workers. In the wake of the tragedy, New York State established a factory investigating commission tasked with examining working conditions in factories across the state. This commission, led by Frances Perkins, a young social worker who would later become Franklin D. Roosevelt's Secretary of Labor, conducted hundreds of inspections and interviews, exposing the widespread dangers faced by workers. The commission's findings led to a wave of groundbreaking legislation aimed at improving workplace safety and protecting workers' rights. New laws mandated fire safety measures such as sprinkler systems, clearly marked exits and fire drills. Child labor laws were strengthened and limitations were placed on working hours for women and children. The right of workers to organize and bargain collectively was also recognized, laying the groundwork for the modern labor movement. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, a tragedy forever etched in the city's memory, serves as a poignant reminder of the human cost of unchecked greed and indifference. It stands as a solemn testament to the importance of workplace safety regulations and the ongoing struggle for workers' rights. The names of the 146 victims are inscribed on a memorial near the site of the fire, ensuring that their stories are never forgotten. Each year on the anniversary of the tragedy, people gather to commemorate their lives and to reaffirm their commitment to fighting for social justice and worker protections. The fire, though a devastating loss, sparked a movement that continues to this day. The legacy of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire extends far beyond the borders of New York City and the early 20th century. Its echoes resonate in the workplace regulations and worker protections that we often take for granted today. The fire served as a catalyst for a sea change in attitudes towards workplace safety and the rights of workers to a safe and just work environment. The reforms sparked by the fire laid the groundwork for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, a federal agency established in 1970 to ensure safe and healthful working conditions for all Americans. OSHA sets and enforces workplace safety standards, conducts inspections, and provides training and outreach programs to employers and workers. The Triangle Fire's legacy also extends to the labor movement, which gained momentum in the aftermath of the tragedy. The fire highlighted the vulnerability of workers, particularly women and immigrants, who often toiled in dangerous conditions, with little power to demand better treatment. While the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire marked a turning point in the fight for workers' rights, the struggle for workplace justice continues today. In an era of globalization and evolving work arrangements, new challenges have emerged, demanding renewed vigilance and advocacy. The rise of the gig economy, with its flexible work arrangements and independent contractor status, has blurred the lines of traditional employment, making it more difficult for workers to access basic labor protections and benefits. The exploitation of undocumented workers, often subjected to wage theft, unsafe working conditions, and fear of retaliation, remains a persistent problem. The fight for a living wage, paid sick leave, and affordable healthcare remains a pressing issue for millions of workers struggling to make ends meet. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire stands as a stark reminder that the pursuit of profit must never come at the expense of human life. It teaches us that the fight for workplace safety and workers' rights is an ongoing struggle, one that demands constant vigilance, unwavering advocacy, and a commitment to holding those in power accountable. As we remember the victims of this tragedy, we must also honor their memory by continuing the fight for a more just and equitable society. We must demand safe working conditions for all, regardless of their occupation, immigration status, or socio-economic background. We must support policies that protect workers' rights, empower unions, and ensure that the lessons of the Triangle Fire are never forgotten. By remembering the past, learning from its mistakes, and fighting for a better future, we can honor the memory of those who perished in the flames and build a world where such tragedies are never repeated.